Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and buckle up for the wild ride that is episode 28 of F1 Philosophy. We find ourselves gathered once more on the turbulent tarmac of existential motor racing ponderings. By some twist of fate, or perhaps a quirk of cosmic mechanics, our elusive compatriot, Nicholas, has rejoined our merry band of philosophers. He ventured into the wild blue yonder, ostensibly in search of mental clarity and perhaps the perfect espresso. Alas, his return signals not the triumphant emergence of a reformed psyche, but rather a continuation of that delightful chaos we've come to expect. Improved mental health? We're not betting men, but one might say the odds remain as precarious as a Monaco hairpin turn. Nevertheless, we embrace his singular brand of madness with open arms. Onward into the breach. Now, on to the work at hand, a few formalities, if you will. You may find us on YouTube at F1 Philosophy, on Instagram at F1_philosophy, and finally drop us a line at f1philosophypod@gmail.com to join our ever-entertaining fantasy league.
Thank you, Producer Gatsby. That was quite the introduction. You're getting really good at this. That's one thing I saw while I was abroad. I can finally announce it. I was in Italy and Greece. Since we have a million fans, I didn't want to be hounded on my vacation. But I noticed that while I was there, that Producer Gatsby, you're really coming into your own here, and I'm very impressed. Sean, you got like a really good sidekick in Producer Gatsby.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, it turns out when you give him a chance, he actually does his job.
Yeah, I'm going to stop berating you, Producer Gatsby. It was a somewhat nice introduction. Yeah, obviously I didn't come back with mental clarity. I'm still the crazy person I always was. And thank you, Sean, by the way, to everybody who doesn't know our text chain between us. Sean had to give me a lashing towards the end of my vacation because I was obviously on my phone on my downtime looking up why Mick Schumacher didn't get the Alpine seat. And finally, Sean was like, hey, can you just enjoy yourself for once and not be crazy? And I was like, yeah, I can try. I can try, but I can't succeed, but I tried. And I appreciate that, Sean. Thank you for telling me to finally like relax and not go on every crazy conspiratorial tangent in F1.
I will say that was less my doing. I have actually had feedback from some of the listeners that you sound batshit crazy and you need to work on your mental health. So that was more so, okay, this is not just me. Let's get you actually on vacation then.
Yeah, okay. I still thank you, and thank you to our listeners who are trying to calm me down. I will. This, like I said in the last couple of months, F1's too good to care about all the little shit anymore. I'm loving it. I'm loving the ride. I'm still going to have my own biases from time to time, but to our faithful listeners, I'm going to calm down. I don't know if you saw on our YouTube channel, there was a harsh comment on one of it's actually a solo episode of mine. It was the last therapy that I did from someone in Greece, I believe.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Basically saying, you don't know anything about Europe. Why are you commenting on it?
It's probably not wrong.
He's not wrong at all. And as I re-listened to the episode to see what he was talking about, I was like, oh, I was a total asshole.
As you usually are.
As I usually am. So to that listener, I forget your name off a hand, and I'll shout you out in the upcoming solo episode that I'm going to do. I'm going to give my recap and thoughts. Sean had his moment with Gatsby to talk about all the things you thought about, and yeah, that was a nice little slip in of how good Beerman was doing. But he did. I'll talk about that in the solo episode. For a while, I doubted myself for a brief period. But yeah, sorry, enough with that rambling. I had a great time in Italy and Greece. As Gatsby mentioned, I was freaking out about the Hyundai i10, the rental car I had in the mountains of Corfu. Okay, I'm going to try and be fair. It's not the Fiat Panda. I wanted the Fiat Panda. I actually really wanted the Suzuki Jimmy. So that's probably why I'm being hard on the Hyundai i10. And
Suzuki would have been a better car.
It would have, in the worst possible way. To everybody listening, Sean and I are being very sarcastic. They're all bad cars.
I disagree. The Suzuki Jimmy is legitimately not a terrible vehicle.
Oh, wow. This is breaking news here. Really? The Suzuki's much better abroad. I understand that. Than the Suzukis we got in Canada briefly.
Yeah, they seem to come and go every 15 to 20 years.
Yeah. I was intrigued to try it. It is a nice little compact. It's like a mini Jeep. But I couldn't imagine it being an amazing, durable car.
I didn't say amazing.
Yeah, there you go.
They do exactly what you would expect them to do. Which is
like,
not much.
Yeah, okay. I like those clunky, weird-looking cars. Sean knows this, but you guys don't know this. My dream car for a while was the 1995 Land Rover Disco. Not Discovery. No, it is the Disco.
Yes.
It was the 95 Disco. The clunkiest, most unreliable car. Engine is bulletproof, but a clunky, unreliable car nonetheless.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I was intrigued to try something like that, but I ended up getting stuck with the i10. And the thing I hated about it, it was just a way too thick steering wheel for no reason.
Such an odd complaint to have about a car.
Because I come back to my Toyota Tacoma with a thin, easy to maneuver steering wheel. This i10, it was just weird. Like out of all the things in the car to be big, it was the steering wheel. Like not the gear shift knob, not.
You would have liked a thick stick, wouldn't you?
Oh, shut up. I set myself up for that one. I've been trying to maneuver my words in this ramble so that I didn't set you up, and I still did. But the gearbox on the i10, man, it's just there's nothing there.
What did I tell you to do with it, Nick?
It was good advice. Keep it in second and just floor it.
Yeah, you don't need to shift.
And it's kind of hard in the mountain roads, to your point, to even shift into third gear. Third gear is pushing it at times.
Exactly.
So I might as well have just kept in second.
Keep it above 2,000 RPM and just let her have it.
It's good advice for any car.
Because I had a Hyundai i10 in St. Martin years ago. That's pretty much what we did. Just pedal to the floor, second gear through the entire island.
That's even funnier because there's no mountains in St. Martin. Right. There's no mountain roads. There's just.
It's a volcanic island. There's some elevation change.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, that's probably a smart thing to do. I'm just picturing all Caribbean countries just flat, like Bahamas. Bahamas is just flat.
Yeah, a lot of them are.
Anyways, on that note, I had a great time. I had a great relaxing. I did relax, everybody. I've calmed down. I've seen a lot of great things. I'm still going to have some contrarian ideas from time to time, as you'll hear in my solo episode. I may have to turn on Franco Colapinto after all this hype. We'll talk about that more. I still hate Oliver Behrman. I'm still hopelessly going to push Mick Schumacher from time to time. Nah, actually, I gave up on that. That one's done. That's hopeless. But yeah, it's two decent races, I find. And today we're going to talk about Singapore. And yeah, so we'll get into it. But before we do that, how are you? How have you been, Sean? I haven't really talked to you.
I've been okay. Been picking up the slack from you not being here. Thanks for that.
And you did great.
Yeah, those episodes are a lot of work. Gatsby's a bit of a diva.
Oh my God.
So, other than that, not a whole lot going on. I've got to go back to Michigan this weekend, next week, so that's a bit of a pain in the ass.
You're going to get yourself, what is it, a coney dog?
No, absolutely not. For those, I know we have a lot of listeners in the U.S. who probably know what this is, but for those who don't, a coney dog is a boiled hot dog on a white hot dog bun with white onion and mustard.
Ugh.
It is abusively American. And they worship this shit in Michigan, and I can't for the life of me understand why.
If it was Dijon mustard, I could kind of understand.
That's way too fancy for them.
Oh, okay. But I'm guessing like a Heinz mustard.
Yep.
And it's covered in mustard.
Yep. Well, I think Heinz is mainly Canadian, so it'd probably be French's.
Yes. Even worse.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And usually you see people get like 6 of them. Oh. And it comes with a Greek salad because apparently the only type of salad they have in Michigan is Greek.
Good Greek salad or bad
No,
Greek salad?
bad Greek salad.
Bad Greek salad, okay. Yeah. I was in an island of Greece, and I've learned how to make a new type of Greek salad, which is no dressing, but a lot of feta. The feta becomes the dressing, which is interesting, right?
I feel like I've seen that before. I've had that before, so...
Because like we're in North America. In North America, we arguably actually get better Greek food. Because the version that I got on the islands had no rice, barely any meat, and a whole lot of fucking French fries.
I found my experience in Europe is that French fries have really penetrated a lot of cultures now.
Yeah, what the fuck, Europe? Like, I didn't mind Italy. Like, Italy to me was a little bit, and this is going to sound sacrilege, it was a little bit of a letdown.
I don't know. I loved Italy when I was there, and I hate Italians.
I hate Italians too. So you would think I would have had a good time, but the food was good. But a lot of what used to make Italy good is slowly disappearing. Like, yeah, there's a lot more French fries. And what happened in Europe, there used to be all glass bottles for water. Now it's all plastic. Have you noticed that recently?
I don't know when the last time you were in Europe before this was, but the plastic's been around for a while.
It was there with a lot of glass when I was there in 2015. But as of like I didn't see a single glass bottle in Italy or Greece.
That's unusual.
Very unusual, right?
I still see a lot of them in Germany.
I was going to say, when I was in Munich in 2018, it was all glass. So maybe the Germans are just wise to the effects of BPA poisoning in the human body. And the Italians and Greeks don't really care.
I wouldn't say that. There is still a lot of plastic. The main thing they're annoyed with at the moment is you can't take the cap off of the bottle. Like, you can't physically separate the cap of a Coke bottle. You know that little plastic collar that they have?
Yeah, I like that.
They're no longer perforated around the entire edge, so they just kind of flop over.
Oh.
And last time the Germans were visiting here, that's all they were complaining about.
There's so many stories. I wish we could talk about our experiences in Europe for hours, but we should probably get to Formula One. I do want to hear about why Producer Gatsby is a diva. Does he have a lot of demands? Does he need a trailer now? Does he?
He's very particular about when and how he records. And, those episodes were short episodes, but God damn it took about 4 hours to get them done.
Producer Gatsby.
Yeah.
After everything Sean's done for you.
And I'm sure everybody heard, when he gets going, he really gets going and doesn't shut the fuck up.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm afraid to ask this, but did he get up to anything while I was gone?
I don't know, Gatsby. You tell us. Did you get up to anything?
Let us bask in the catharsis of this tale. I, Gatsby, a noble hound of esteemed heritage and dignity, must regale you with the account of my most formidable nemesis, Stephen, the squirrel, a creature whose shenanigans have long been the bane of my otherwise serene existence. But let me now expound upon the day of my triumph, gentle listener. 'Twas a scene worthy of the most grandiose tapestries. On this fateful eve, whilst the moon cloaked the world in silvery light, I, Gatsby, girded myself for the standoff to end all standoffs. The rascal, in a moment of lamentable hubris, ventured too close to the hallowed grounds near the deck. There, as if guided by the stars themselves, I awaited. With a valiant leap I dashed forth, a gallant blur beneath the canopy of night. Stephen, in his frantic attempts to evade my perilous pursuit, discovered that even his myriad tricks were no match for the cunning born of righteous indignation. With a swift and final maneuver I dispatched the villain, seizing victory with all the glorious flair of my noble heritage. I would wager, dear audience, that no creature was more surprised than Stephen himself. Mayhaps he underestimated the resolve of an old hound, or perhaps he believed his antics were but harmless jests. But know this, all creatures of the woodland, never again shall Stephen's antics disturb my peace. Thus concludes the saga of the squirrely fiend. Let it be known throughout the land that Gatsby, the stalwart hound, remains ever vigilant, ever noble, and ever triumphant in the never-ending quest for tranquility and justice.
Yeah. Producer Gatsby, your English accent is... I've kind of seen through it and seen what you've said here. Did you kill that squirrel and just admitted it on live air?
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he did.
I hope everybody was just enamored by his lovely tale-telling English accent. Like that was very poetic. That was very Shakespearean, one would say.
Like I mentioned in the last episode, that's a lot of words to say you just murdered a squirrel.
Yeah. I wouldn't have you any other way, though. I'm a big fan of this new, confident Gatsby.
I'm surprised he was fast enough to catch him.
He's still sort of young.
He's 8 years old.
Oh. Yeah, for a Doberman, that's past middle age, right?
He's coming up on the end of his life, that's for sure.
Oh, Producer Gatsby. Thank you for working through your retirement for us.
Yeah. Hopefully he's got a few more years left in him. We kind of like him.
Kind of. Don't hurt me, Producer Gatsby. I've decided to be nicer to you from this point forward after this vacation has made me nice and tranquil. So thank you for all the hard work you do, Producer Gatsby. But please stop licking the couch. Anyways, we got a lot to talk about now. But we'll stick, like I said, to Singapore. I kind of want to just stick with McLaren and Red Bull from what I saw here. I think the problem with Formula One media is that we can get lost in the weeds because there's so much to talk about between the 10 teams that I feel like this title fight between Red Bull and McLaren's kind of gone, not under the radar, but it's not the main talking point all the time. We have a legitimate fight right now. And I think not enough people do it justice, and you and I definitely don't, because you and I love to talk about up and down the order because there's so much to talk about. But let's stick between McLaren and Red Bull from what we saw. I was able to watch this race in an Irish pub in Rome, if you'll believe it, drinking a Guinness IPA.
I do believe it because I've been to one and it is a great experience.
It's a better Irish pub, I imagine, than in Ireland. It had the smell, it had the beers, it had the rooms where you could one room to watch Formula One room to watch football, one room to just chill.
Sounds great.
It was a great time. But yeah, Norris crushes it and runs rampant with it.
But you can see why he's not world champion material in that race.
I like where you're going with this. Go on.
I don't know if we want to just jump right into it, but
This is what we do. We jump right into things here.
he pulled out a hell of a lead early on. That was very clear that he was going to lead that race, right? He broke his own curse. He led the first lap from pole.
Yes.
And then proceeded to make all the mistakes. He put his car less than a millimeter from the wall while he had at least a 10-second lead over second place, which was not Max Verstappen, which I'm pretty sure at that point was still his teammate, or maybe Charles. I can't remember exactly. Pushing unnecessarily hard the entire race. Why? Just take a breath.
Thank you for bringing this up, because you and I need to do a recap episode in this next month off and go back over our McLaren discussion. And a theme you and I both had in that discussion was Lando's still a little scared.
I think scared's the wrong word.
I say scared because like you just said, why is he pushing so hard? What is he so worried about? Where's the calm, cool poise? Like you're saying, you're up 10 seconds. Just do everything right in this moment. Be perfectly focused. It sounds like he's pushing so hard because he's worried he could lose it. That's what I would take from there.
Because he has so many times.
Yeah. And like you said, that wasn't the only time. Like you're talking about him kissing the wall, and then there with the lockup.
The lockup where he was basically nose into the wall and just managed to miss it by the smallest fractions and turn out of it. Like if he was a millimeter or two more, he would have had to reverse out of the wall.
Yeah, and would have been past, like I think at that point was Piastri. They put Piastri in a completely different strategy, McLaren, and I have no idea why.
It worked for them.
A 1-3, I think if you follow Norris, you get a 1-2.
Sure.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why they did that. Maybe to signal to Oscar that this is Lando's championship, not yours.
I wouldn't say that. I think it was the inevitable trying to cover off the safety car that never came.
Good prediction by you, by the way.
Right?
Attaboy. What was my outlier prediction? Just since we're here.
Well, your outlier prediction was nonsense, so I had to rework it.
Thank you.
It was Colapinto and Behrman crash out.
Yeah, I totally forgot. Like, K-Mag is so forgettable in my mind right now that I just assume Behrman was racing the rest of the season.
You put K-Mag in your predictions.
Yeah. Listen, it was a long couple weeks, Sean. It's a long couple weeks for me. I need a vacation from my vacation.
I'm sure it can be arranged.
Yeah, it was nonsense. But then I did say Colapinto crashes out, which we'll talk, I guess, another time about that. That did not happen. Yeah, the safety car never came in that race, so McLaren's strategy kind of looked, in my mind, foolish. So that's a good rebuttal to me that if a safety car comes, we get a 1-2 the way we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But back to Lando, he almost pulls a George Russell in 2023 in that same, not the first stint. I think this is the second stint, right?
Yeah, a couple of times he almost did the exact same thing.
What do you think it's going to take for him to act like a champion? Does he just have to win it? Or does he not have it?
I think this is Lando. He may win a championship, and it may be this year. May. But I don't think he is a multiple world champion. And I can't remember exactly our conversation about McLaren earlier in the season. I think he'll win a championship at some point in his career, but he is not a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen or a Michael Schumacher.
Our conversation earlier in the season, I'm going to bring it up now because we just might as well talk about it, was I think we're both right. So I just want to clarify that. I think we're both right. You correctly predicted that McLaren will coalesce around Lando, and they did. I kept asking the nagging question, why the hell did they work so hard to sign Oscar? And this goes to the point you're saying that you don't think Lando's a multiple-time world champion, because you're right. If Lando's ever going to win it, it's this year. Because the one who seems like a world champion in these past two races is Oscar Piastri. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think I'm off base? Do you think I'm right? What, like?
I think you're on the right track. Why they fought so hard to get Oscar Piastri, I think, is evident in this season. It's his second season in F1. The car is good now, but it hasn't been good since the beginning of his time with the team. And he's fought through the bullshit. He's fought through being the second driver. He's fought through not having the upgrades that his teammate has had. And he's come back and he's won races. And he's consistently proven that he can be there or thereabouts when Lando makes a mistake. And that's why they fought so hard for him, because McLaren now is in a spot where they lead the world championship for the constructors for the first time in 12 years, I think it is.
The last time they led it was 2014, which was the first race when Magnussen got that fluke second.
Right.
And Button got somewhere in the points. Okay, so that doesn't count. So realistically, the last time they looked like they could win it was 2007, 2008, 2006, around there.
Right, which would have been Lewis Hamilton time frame.
Lewis and Alonso was the last time. Well, they got that penalty, that cheating scandal, right? In 2007. So they should have won the constructors, but they didn't. Spygate, was it? Was that 2007?
Yes, that was 2007. I'm trying to remember. That was yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the last time they won the constructors was Hakkinen and Coulthard. It was in the 2000s or late 90s.
Would it not have been with a Hamilton?
No, because 2008 Ferrari won because of Massa and Raikkonen, whereas it was Lewis and Kovalainen. So Lewis won the drivers,
right?
But Massa and Raikkonen both had a claim to the title at different times in the season.
Right.
So Ferrari won the constructors. 2009, Ferrari and McLaren fell flat. And then 2010 on was
Red Bull
and Mercedes.
Yep. So where I was going with that, McLaren now leads the constructors title because they've consistently been able to put two drivers in the points.
Yes.
They've outdone Red Bull by having two good drivers. They don't have one amazing driver.
Yet.
They have two good drivers.
Yet. I think Oscar Piastri next year becomes that amazing driver. But anyways, keep going.
No, I think that's more or less it. They've made a car that works, and they've made a car that works really well, and I talked about that in the last episode, why I think that car works. And what we're seeing now is two world-class drivers taking that to multiple wins and capitalizing on Red Bull fumbling the ball.
Mm. Before we get into Red Bull, I just want to say, this is something you and I both said, though, at the beginning of the season. When you win the constructors with two good drivers, it's hard to win the driver's title because you need one clear-cut driver.
Unless they're both consistently finishing 1-2.
So like a Mercedes with Rosberg and Hamilton.
Right. Then you're going to take both either way, and it's just a matter of the two drivers fighting it out for which one gets the win.
But in 2014, 2015, Lewis was clear number one. He was killing Rosberg.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rosberg comes back in 2016, and they had a title fight. This is not the situation. Either of those situations are not present this year for McLaren.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. They're setting themselves up, if they don't win the driver's title this year, they're setting themselves up for a dilemma next year as to who the number one driver is. And I think Lando will be surprised.
Yes, I think he will be. And frankly, I'm annoyed that McLaren caved and agreed to pick a number one driver just because the media was pressing them to do that. They didn't need to pick him because, frankly, that one-off in Hungary where we saw the arguing between Norris and the pit wall as to whether he should let Piastri by, that's a one-off. Lando, has better finishes, but he's also gotten the upgrades before Piastri did. In equal hardware, Piastri's more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll get into next year, everything reset, good cars all around, and Piastri will outshine Lando.
I agree because this is something that came to me on my vacation where I reflected on a lot of our talks where I was hard on Piastri. I'm like, why are you so far off Lando some races? Why are you just not making it happen sometimes? And it hit me. I'm like, this is only his second year.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen him be so consistent and so exceptional these past 2 years. It feels like he's been here forever, right? Like it feels like he belongs here.
Yeah.
And it's I forgot that this is only his second season.
No, it feels like he's been in F1 as long, if not longer, than Lando.
Yeah.
But that's definitely not the case.
No.
And this goes back to what we were saying in our McLaren discussion about his maturity and his general attitude is just there. Like, he believes he belongs there. And this is what I think is the problem with Lando. Lando is there competing against his heroes. Everybody he's looked up through from karting to F4, F3, F2 are all of his heroes. He's competing with Alonso and Hamilton and all the people he grew up idolizing. And it feels like it's one of these, I'm here, I have to prove myself, but holy shit, I don't belong type of situations.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. And Piastri rolls up and goes, yeah, this is what I worked for. Let's do it.
It's something we actually talked about on the summer break. Don't hero worship.
Yeah, exactly.
You're seeing a perfect result of it. Yeah, Oscar just believes in Oscar. Oscar's his own hero.
And this is something that I didn't know about Oscar, and I was listening to him on a podcast last year. So during his first season in F1. And the guy that was interviewing him is a big car fanatic and loves cars, and naturally assumed that because Piastri is a race car driver, that he loved cars too. It's not the case. Piastri couldn't necessarily give a shit about hot rods or high performance cars or anything like that. He's actually into RC cars and doesn't really care. And then another thing I didn't know is that Piastri's father is the founder of HP Tuners.
This is a guitar company, I'm assuming?
No. HP Tuners is a software that allows you to tune car ECUs, specifically focused on GMs. They've expanded to Fords, they do other things, but HP Tuners, if you're a GM guy and you like to tune your race car or anything else, you probably use HP Tuners. So that's where the money came for Piastri to do what he's done, get to F1. His dad started a company that basically cornered the market in performance tuning for GM products.
Wow.
But Oscar isn't really a car guy.
Holden's. Well, probably Holden's how he started with.
Yeah, it would have been Holden, but... And that's... I think that, in a way, helps him because he's just got this natural talent to go out and do it. And he enjoys doing it, but he doesn't fall into the hype of everything else. Like, he's got his own hobbies outside of racing. So this is literally, yeah, I'm here, I do the job, I get it done. This is it.
He's Kimi Räikkönen perfected. This is his hobby, this is his job, I'm going to do it well.
And I've actually heard people making that connection, that Kimi is the Iceman because he just wanted to be there and he got out and he did it and he didn't care about anything else. And Piastri is Kimi, but more personable.
And more work ethic.
Yeah, where Kimi was just raw talent. You put him on anything with wheels or some things without wheels and he'd be fast.
Mm-hmm. He just wanted to race. He didn't care about anything else. He didn't want to actually have to do the work to be a racer.
Right.
He was notoriously like eating a different diet, right? Eating popsicles on their breaks. Whereas like Lewis Hamilton makes sure he doesn't gain a single kilo.
Yeah, exactly. And Ron Dennis used to have to go in and wake Kimi 5 minutes before the grid. You know, he's sleeping under a table in his trailer. I have to go wake him up to get him into the car.
Yeah. And you see Piastri, like I saw a clip of when Hamilton clipped him in Monza in 2023. He's just like, oh, that's rough. Oh, okay, I guess our race is going to be compromised. Whereas if that was Lando, he's screaming, he's swearing, he's freaking out. If that's Max, same thing. It's okay to be passionate. It's okay to be emotional if you can channel it in the case of Max. Lando just seems to explode. And he doesn't always have this focus afterwards. He gets rattled.
Yeah, and I think his exploding isn't as emotional as Verstappen's is, for example. Verstappen's is way over the top compared to Norris. But you're right. Once Norris gets rattled, it doesn't go away.
Whereas you can't rattle Piastri.
No.
So we did all this background, we did all this talking so I could ask you, A, does Lando pull it off? Based on what we're saying. Like, yeah, we just talked a lot about Piastri, but based on what you said, can Lando pull off this championship? And because this seems to be his only shot, and I think he kind of knows it.
I think he does know it. And we talked about it a few episodes ago that he has to get 8 points on Max Verstappen until the end of the season.
It's tough.
But he's done it. The last 2 races, he's maintained that. Right? So it's not that he's gotten 8 points in the last 2 races, but that deficit hasn't grown in the last 2 races. Right? So as long as he keeps this deficit and doesn't let it grow, like if he starts getting into the range of he needs 10 points on Verstappen or 11 points or 12 points, then you're into the range of, oh shit. Yeah, it's mathematically possible, but it's not statistically possible.
So we're still in the statistically possible range then, somewhat.
Yes.
Six races, 51 points, 52 points. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have sprint races. And we have the possibilities for DNFs, right? Gatsby and I talked about it last week that the Honda engine is not as reliable as it was, and the reasons why that might be. But ultimately, if Max gets a DNF,
it's probably over.
It's game on.
I would say it's game over if Max DNFs. More than likely, unless Lando blows it, they pull a Ferrari. But if there's a DNF with the Lando win, that's then what? That's 27 points with 5 races to go, we'll say, after Austin. That's more than possible.
It is. But there are a lot of ways that this calculation can go. Right?
It could also work in Max's favor. Red Bull could figure something out. You're right.
They could trade DNFs. Or Max could get a P9, Lando gets a P2, Oscar wins the race. Right? You do that a couple of times, and the game is a lot tighter. You know, we saw at this race where Verstappen thanked Daniel Ricciardo at the end of the race for getting that fastest lap. And if it comes down to a 1-point win, that fastest lap was the most important lap of the season.
Let's save our eulogy for Daniel for the end of this episode.
Yes.
Yeah. I doubt it's going to come down to that. I severely doubt it's a 1 point.
It would take a lot to get to 1 point. But this is similar to what we saw in 2021.
Kind of. Yeah, and the McLaren is, I guess, not tuned like the Mercedes is. It's not that much faster. Wouldn't say it's like a second a lap faster. I think it's just a couple tenths at a time. And Red Bull's been having, let's start talking about Red Bull. Red Bull's been having tire degradation issues since, I can't even remember now. I think since at least Belgium.
Yeah, which realistically is a byproduct of the underlying issues of the car. They have tire degradation issues because the car is so unbalanced that there is more slip than should be because they can't drive it properly.
Does Red Bull owe Sergio an apology? Like, we didn't really, like, you guys kind of talked about, you and Gatsby. Does Red Bull owe Sergio an apology for ignoring him this past year? Or,
in a way, they did that. Horner did mention that, you know, it's clear now where the mistake happened and that it affected Checo more than it affected Verstappen. Right? It wasn't a very clear apology in the sense where they said, yeah, sorry, Checo, our bad. It was more so oh, yeah, it seems to have affected Checo more, so now we're fixing it. And, oh, by the way, this is why we didn't sack him. So they turned it into, oh, yeah, we knew this all along. You guys just wanted us to sack him, but we knew better, you know, tooting their own horn. So, short of apologizing to him, which I think he deserves, but anyway.
Yes and no, because then he gets stuck behind Hulkenberg for what? 25 laps in Singapore? While Max finishes second in a course he's not good in.
Yep.
So I don't know. I go week to week. I'm like, maybe Checo, we should stop being so hard on him. And then I see shit like this where, yeah, I'm a little biased because I never want to see Hulkenberg succeed. But holy shit, you should have gone around him.
But Singapore is difficult to overtake, at least in the old configuration. We have to give them a little bit of leeway this year because that fourth DRS zone did catch them out. You know, I was watching practice and just about everybody lost it because of the change in the braking zone coming out of that fourth DRS zone. So it would have been a more difficult race, but clearly it wasn't that difficult because there was no safety cars. Nobody got it wrong in the race. So I will say, though, it gives some credence to your theory that Red Bull built a Singapore winning car and sacrificed the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Because where the fuck was this performance from Max last year?
Yeah, they were just blaming the bouncing. They just sort of gave up on the weekend. I think maybe last year they had won so much that when this bad weekend came along, they were just like, okay, let's just roll with the punches.
Yeah, we'll take the L this week. Because realistically, nothing changed. They added a DRS zone, but they didn't resurface the track. It was no less bumpy than it was last year. So the car should have been just as bad, if not worse, than it was last year.
It was equally bad for Sergio because Sergio missed Q3 again.
Sure.
Because Max missed Q3 last year. But this is the question I'm leading up to. Is Max still that good? Like, no matter how bad the car is, Max still looks that good.
Yes.
And this is how he's earning his championship if he gets it. It's races like this where he had no business being second.
Yeah, and this is what we've said, right? Max is not a human. He's a racing android. He is the exception to just about every rule there is. He's probably the least fit driver on the grid, spends the least time training, but all he wants to do is race. He just gets in the car and drives. And when he's not in a physical car driving, he's in a sim setup driving. Right? So he has been bred to be nothing but a race car driver and be the best. And he seems, based on what we've heard from Red Bull, he seems to have a handle on this car despite it being, for all intents and purposes, a bag of garbage.
A monster, as he calls it.
Yes. But he can still put it there. Not as consistently as he did last year, but he can still put it up there when it counts.
This was a big deal. Like, this is why I always just wanted to talk about McLaren and Red Bull. When he less than second, and they're in DEFCON 5.5, or whatever the highest DEFCON is. Does it go 5 to 1 or 1 to 5? I can't remember.
No, I can't remember at this point either.
Anyways, they're at the highest DEFCON if Max finishes 4th. But he pulls out a podium when they needed it most. Yeah, the championship is still on. Yeah, Lando did what he needed to do. But holy shit, that's a big deal.
Yep.
So,
I mean, forget about the Drivers' Championship. The Constructors' Championship is where the money is paid, right? So Red Bull should be kicking ass to get everything they can from now till the end of the season to get that first place back from McLaren. Because Red Bull is a massive organization that has invested so much in F1, including their own engine manufacturing facility. They need that money. Not that Red Bull will pull out if they're not getting the money. They proved that from 2016 to 2021. When they weren't winning the championship, they will keep investing in it. Red Bull wants to be in F1, that's clear. But at the level that they are in F1, if they're not winning, they're losing money. Frankly, they're probably losing money if they're winning. So it's a matter of minimizing the losses. Right?
Brings up a good point then. That, like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that McLaren wins next year if Red Bull doesn't win the Constructors this year, because Red Bull will have lost too much money to compete.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think if they lose the Constructors this year, they throw more money at it within the limits of the cost cap in the right areas. All right. They're too heavily invested in F1 to just not do it. Right? This is the reason why McLaren is in the financial state they are. A couple years ago, they basically had to sell off and then finance back their entire classic car collection.
Oof.
Just to keep the facility running, because they had spent so long without being in winning positions that they weren't making any money. So they sold off basically all the classic cars that they have. You see the facility in Woking has, I forget what they call it, but basically it's a corridor lined with all the championship winning cars, all the, the fancy shit.
Senna's cars, the Hakkinen and Coulthard cars,
Exactly. All those are lined up. McLaren doesn't technically own any of those anymore.
Huh. That's so sad.
And they've basically had to sell them all off and then lease them back to maintain the capital it takes to go racing.
Do they ever plan to get him back? Because I know Zach Brown has Dale Earnhardt's NASCAR. So does Zach Brown plan to eventually give all those cars they sold back to McLaren? Or
it's not that they don't own them; they are owned by McLaren. But it's one of these. I don't know the right term for it. I'm not a financial person. I hate accounting. They do own the cars, but it's one of these things where they had to sell them and then buy them back, lease them back, whatever the terminology is. I don't know.
Yeah, I should, but the term eludes me. Anyways, Red Bull. You and Gatsby talked about how Red Bull seems to now know the problem. The question I have is, do you think they can fix it in time? Do you think this month is perfectly timed in the sense they could come back to Austin and potentially maybe win 1 or 2 Grand Prix of the next 6?
So they know the problem, and Horner came out and told us exactly what it was. They made a mistake in their development plan in Spain of last year. They changed the floor in Spain last year, and that's when things changed. That's when the design went away from them. And they've been chasing that mistake ever since. So the car has been progressively worse since Spain last year.
Which is when Checo started having problems.
Right. So they know where it went wrong. They apparently know why it went wrong. But this is now baked into the car. So yes, they can try to get it back. But realistically, they've run out of money to continue making changes at this point. Because Sergio's had so many crashes, because Red Bull has such a large operating budget, because they've been upgrading the car, they don't really have the funding within the budget cap to continue developing the car. So they will bring a couple more upgrades, I'm sure, but it will be modifications of existing hardware. Right? Like we've seen this before where they'll pull up an old spec rear wing, like a high downforce rear wing from Monaco, for example, and cut bits of it away to better fit Mexico. Or take the Zandvoort spec wing to cut it away to better fit Mexico. That's doable. That's much cheaper under the budget cap than developing a new rear wing. Right? So they'll do stuff like that. But this is going to come down to, okay, we understand where the problem is. Can we work around it with setup? Can we work around it with driver skill? And what is the minimum amount of money we have to put into it?
Max can do the first 2 things. And if you sacrifice Checo in the constructors, you can just pull out the driver's title. But like so they have Sophie's choice right now. Do we make Max happy and give him a 4th, or do we focus on the money for the constructors with Red Bull. It doesn't seem like you can get both at this point. It's going to be very hard.
It's going to be very hard, and it's going to take a whole lot of effort and a massive push from everybody to try and make both drivers happy. Because it's clear to me, at least, that whatever they do will favor one driver over the other.
You have to, yeah.
You're not seeing with Red Bull any races where you have two happy drivers. If Checo is happy, like we saw in Baku, Max isn't. And if Max is happy, Checo isn't.
Everybody knows I'm a Max fan. I would like to see him win. I wouldn't mind seeing status quo in the sense of Red Bull winning this year, and that would be it. And McLaren comes out flying next year. But as someone who's, like I said, who's rooting for Red Bull this year, I think they might lose both. I think there's a distinct possibility right now.
It's definitely a possibility.
Law VS, by the way, who I tout all the time, talks about how Marco signaled that they've given up on the constructors by saying we're going to have to sacrifice Sergio's part. He said it in different words. But like it's basically what you just said. Yeah, they can't make both drivers happy, and Marco signaled that, yeah, we're just going to make Max happy the rest of the season.
Yeah, but as we've talked about it before, Marco is an old racist Austrian man, so he just never liked Checo to begin with, Verstappen is as much his doing as it is Jos Verstappen's.
Yeah, that explains why.
That comment was always going to come. That's my point.
Okay. And to your point, Max, the only reason Marco's still there is because of Max. They're that close. So you're right. Like he would say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would say that. Yeah. I don't know with Max. Max seems to have everybody's back. And everybody seems to spread rumors about him and his relationship with Horner, with Marco, with Sergio. But Max doesn't seem to have an enemy except for Esteban Ocon. So I don't know what to think about Max, but yeah.
I've said it before. Max just wants to drive. He doesn't want to deal with all the politics bullshit. He just wants to get in the car and drive. So when it comes to what is Max's take on it all, it's irrelevant. He doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, I was just shooting the shit. It was more of a rhetorical question, just me commenting. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Time is going to tell. These next 6 races are huge. I think the upgrades may help. I think you may still see a good Red Bull, and if anyone can pull out a win, it'll be Max Verstappen. If he doesn't, that's a big, big discussion that we'll have later. Since we're still on Red Bull, let's throw V-Carb into the mix, and let's talk about this Daniel Ricciardo sacking. Go.
Sorry, just before you start on that, the term I don't like, and it's not because I'm a Danny Rick fan and I'm trying to soften the blow. When you actually look at how this went down and enough information is out there to piece it together, it was not a sacking in the sense that he got fired mid-contract. His contract was over after Singapore. So it's a non-renewal of his contract, which is unusual mid-season, because usually you would have a driver finish out a season. At least that's how it's been for the last 10 years. The case here was Danny's contract ended at Singapore.
Oh, I didn't know that.
This is at least the information that's come out. No, I haven't seen the contract, so I can't say that with 100% certainty. But what I've heard is the contract ended after Singapore. And it's not that it ended after a race, it ends at a date.
Liam Lawson's "we need to sign him" date.
That was before the Danny Rick date.
Okay. Well, it's still what's the word? It's still like not coincidental, but it's still correlated.
Yes. Yeah, it is correlated.
in the sense that, Liam, we will have this figured out by September 15th, even if that means you have to sit out Singapore type of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. I bring up sacking in the sense that there's also other information out there saying Daniel could have stayed in the Red Bull family, could have still stayed as reserve driver. He rejected that. I was going to get to that. I was saying it's a sacking in the sense that they're parting ways and that his performance had something to do with it. But
Well, I don't know that they're parting ways.
we're going to talk about this because a lot of the reports the last couple months have been if Liam comes into the car, there's still a chance Danny could have 2025 at the V-Carb. Or they finally pulled the trigger with Checo Perez. Is that what you're alluding to?
There's a couple of things here. Now, how emotional Danny was at the end of the Singapore race tells me he believes the contract is over, that he is truly out of an F1 seat next year. So I think what you're alluding to is the comments that Sergio might announce his retirement in Mexico.
Which, to be fair to Sergio, those were rumors last year.
Yes.
So I doubt that's going to happen. But yeah, I've heard those rumors too.
Right. So that is a rumor, and I've heard a lot of speculation that this is the agreement that was made for the summer break, that he would see out the rest of the year, provided that he retires at a time that is convenient. So it doesn't look like Red Bull is firing him. He's making the decision on his own. Right. But then if that was the case, you would think that somebody at Red Bull would have a word with Daniel to say, hey, listen, you're not going to compete. You're not going to contest the next 6 races. We're going to put Liam in the car and we'll sort out the pieces as to who goes where and what now once we know what the situation is.
Based on Liam's performances. Okay,
right.
This is making a lot of sense now. I like where you're going with this. Yeah.
So then Danny would have raced Singapore, would have put the fastest lap in at the end of the race, and then would have gone into the media pen and been like, well, shit happens, but we'll see you soon.
Or even said, I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of days, but I'm optimistic. He could have said something like that. He could have said, I'm optimistic. I'm hoping we can all talk and work something out. He could have stayed positive, I think.
He could have stayed positive, and you wouldn't have seen the level of emotion that he had. Like, in that race, it legitimately seemed like he knew his career was over.
Yeah.
So, that makes me think the Sergio Perez out of Red Bull and one of the two, either Liam or Danny, will end up at Red Bull next year is not the likely situation.
No.
But that is the speculation that's out there.
I don't think Liam ends up at Red Bull next year.
I hope he doesn't.
Because I'm going to talk about this too solo, but yeah, he's sounding very arrogant already. Your Gasly prediction or comparison is spot on early in the year. He thinks he's already there. He thinks he's already done it.
Yes.
And in my opinion, he's Nick DeVries and Yuki Tsunoda. He's that level. He's not Daniel Ricciardo. And I'm not trying to shit on Yuki. I'm just trying to say if you look at his performances in those 5 races, they weren't anything exceptional. And we talked about in mid-season 2 that Silverstone test. They didn't have much faith in him. There was a negative aspect to that Silverstone test that they talked about. I don't think there's anything really there. And why would you destroy Daniel's career for him?
Daniel destroyed his own career.
Yes and no.
He did. That's all there is to it.
He didn't perform to the level he was expected. But in one season since he's come back, and he had 5 races off for breaking his hand, which I think was the real catalyst in his downfall. He's never been the same since that. He's been more cautious.
He hasn't been the same since he left McLaren.
Yeah. And to play devil's advocate, he would actually be perfect with Lando right now because Lando would be the clear number one. He may not have scored as many points as Oscar, but there would be a clear number one. And McLaren, that's a bit of an aside. Yes, I agree with yours and Helmut Marko's statement that he lost his killer instinct since he left Red Bull. Maybe even Renault. There was still some killer instinct in Renault.
And that's actually part of what I was going to say. If he was still at Renault, Alpine, he'd probably be doing better than both their drivers.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But yes, Danny underperformed. He's in his 1 year, he has about the same amount of points as Hülkenberg in Hülkenberg's first season back in Haas. Hülkenberg got 9, Danny got 12 this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's more perception. For some reason, people just expected more of Danny, so he's been relegated. He's been easy to get rid of.
No, and that's exactly it, because Yuki has more points than him this year, but 12 points is nothing to laugh at. Like, the two of them together have gotten VCarb to a point where they're not imminently at risk of bumping down the order.
They're 4 spots ahead of where they were last season at this point.
Right.
They were last. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I understand Danny did it to himself, but in the sense, I think more the media and more the surrounding aura of his expectation did it to him.
Oh, and I absolutely agree with you on that. The point that I'm making is he wouldn't be in this position if he hadn't left Red Bull.
Or Renault. Yeah, you're right. But that shouldn't disqualify him from the last 6 races of this season for Liam Lawson. It just seems so silly. It's so bad that I actually agree with the majority of Formula One media in this instance.
I'm going to stop you there because this is something we've talked about on this episode, on this show, of Formula One teams being afraid to change drivers and the average length of a Formula One career these days being so much longer than they used to be. Right? This is what we had talked about wanting. You're not performing. Get the fuck out. I'm going to put this guy in.
Not with 6 races left.
Why not?
Because he's still been the best driver on that team for a while now. Yuki's fallen off, unfortunately. I'm not anti-Yuki. I'm just saying Yuki had a great first part of the season, and he's kind of dropped off a little bit. Danny's been doing a lot of the points and a lot of the better races since.
Well, to that note, maybe they've tried to cater setup and upgrades to Danny to try and help him improve. So the car's gone away from Yuki, but they've basically said, okay, we've tried to tailor the car to you and you're still not performing.
Okay. That's a fair rebuttal. But to that, I would say this is an icon of Formula One. And to your point, you're right. Hey, if you're not performing, get the fuck out. We've made that comment. But at the same time, let him leave. Let him leave properly, not like this.
Yeah, and that's where I have a problem with it. You know, if it was one of these, stick around, Checo might not be here next year, we're going to have seats to play with, it wouldn't have been what it was. The part that bothers me about it is the VCarb didn't have a say in what happened to Daniel. Right? An interview with Laurent Mekies, the team principal of VCarb, basically said, hey, we don't know what's going to happen to Danny. How the fuck don't you know?
On Sunday night in Singapore. Yeah, you're right. How don't you know?
He's your driver. He didn't know. Red Bull didn't say anything. This was all reported in the media, and Red Bull didn't have an answer. VCarb didn't have an answer. Clearly, Danny knew.
And Lawson knew, too.
I was about to say, Liam confirmed that he knew before Sunday that he was going to be in that seat. So everybody knew. This guy's been in your family. And yes, he left and he came back, and you've welcomed him back, and you've made it clear that you wanted him there. To just relegate him into nothingness and not have any fucking comment, that's the part that bothers me.
Yeah. Because like we've talked about, the one who needed the driver who needed a time on the sidelines for 6 races, knowing he had a contract, was not Daniel Ricciardo, it was Sergio Perez. This would have been the perfect time to give Daniel one last shot.
Which is what we had said earlier in the season, right? Mm-hmm. You claim you have 4 seats and you can do whatever you want with them. The rules allow you to do this, by the way. They could have put Danny in the Red Bull and Checo in the V-carb, or had Checo sit out and put Lawson in the V-carb.
Yeah, exactly. And Lawson's in a weird situation where they don't seem to have much confidence in him, where they basically insinuated, yeah, we don't want to lose you. We don't want to go put out all the stops for you. You may not get Red Bull. We're not confident that you'll ever be promoted to Red Bull. We didn't like your tests. And if you fuck up, we'll bring Danny back next year. That's the weirdest part of it all. I've heard reports like, yeah, if he's not that good, they might just bring Daniel back for 2025.
Yeah, and this has been brewing for a while, because Marco loves Lawson. Lawson is his pet project. He thinks he's another Verstappen. Horner doesn't agree. And I think that's why we've seen the hesitation to put Lawson in that seat, because Horner doesn't agree with Marco here, which is counter to the Gasly argument that I made earlier, because Marco didn't like Gasly. Horner did.
I'll add to, just as a rebuttal. Marco loved De Vries, Horner didn't.
Yes.
So the last one Horner was right on. Sort of. I think he just needed more time, if you ask me. But yeah, so this is a tug of war between them through not one driver, but now it looks like 3 drivers, maybe more, maybe even Albon. Who was Albon's pet? I think it was Horner's. Horner liked Albon.
No, I think Albon's the middle ground. Nobody really cared. He was there. They saw some skill in him enough to put him in the seat. But I would liken Albon to Hadjar now, because Hadjar shows some skill. He needs a little bit of polishing, that's clear, but nobody's talking about Hadjar. Every once in a while you hear, oh yeah, well, we've got a lot of people in the junior series, Hadjar, and I forget who the guy in F3 is at the moment.
Lindblad.
No. Oh yeah, sorry, Arvin Lindblad. Yeah. You'll hear little bits about them, but nobody is even mentioning that Hadjar has a chance to come in.
Sort of. They sort of, for a brief period, said, oh, maybe he might replace Danny and then Sergio even.
Oh, I'm not talking about media. I'm talking about from the Red Bull camp.
Oh, yeah.
Red Bull seemed to forget that he's there.
And he's been warranting some good performances and doing some good work in F2. If I'm not mistaken, he's won the most, like sprint and feature.
I believe so, but somehow is currently not the leader of the series.
Yeah, I think he's 3rd because Bortoletto's just been more consistent, much like how Aaron was leading it for a while without a win.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we've touched on so much there, but yeah, so the tug of war is going to continue, but yet after his bullshit performance in Singapore, you relegate Sergio. You don't do this to Danny. And this would be a perfect time to see if Danny doesn't do it at that Red Bull, he even said, hey, if I can't compete at a high level, I'll walk away. So you would have given him a perfect chance to say, hey, I'm out. And you keep this good reputation, because Red Bull just fucked their reputation hard. Nobody is looking at them the right way, not even me.
I don't know about that. Their reputation has kind of been shit since they went through, 6 drivers in 2 years?
at that time in 2018. Yeah, but they eventually got it right.
Sure.
Those were growing pains, you could say.
Yeah, but this is another set of that. You're going to go through drivers faster than you go through design philosophies. And let's just be fair. Danny had his shot. He had 14 years in F1. 8 Grand Prix wins. I don't know how many podiums. A lot. 258 Grand Prix starts. He's had a good career. He's had a great career. If this were 15 years ago, he'd be one of the greats. Right? So it's, to me, if his career is over now, he has nothing to complain about. He's had a great career. He's done what he wanted to do. He's got a lot of credentials behind him to go do something else. You know, he's always said he wants to race NASCAR. Raikkonen, Button, Kvyat, Juan Pablo Montoya, they've all gone and raced NASCAR, and they've all been done well because, frankly, it's not hard to beat the Americans at NASCAR.
Oh, but if you ask the American media, Joey Logano's better than Max Verstappen.
Right.
Yeah.
So he now has the freedom and the money to go and do all of that. And I get that he feels he has something to prove in F1. But frankly, his career is up there. Like, there are a lot of people that we talk about who haven't had the careers that he's had.
Yeah, like Irvine only had 4 wins. 4 years. Yeah, he's a great.
Right.
I put him as a great. John Alesi, a lot of people rate highly. I don't. Gerhard Berger doesn't have 8 wins.
Fisichella,
yeah, that's Truly. Yeah.
right?
Hulkenberg, for some reason, is in that discussion. Anyways.
I want to say Kovalainen's up there too.
1 win, yeah.
So, out of all of that, Danny should be ranked as one of the better drivers in F1.
8 wins with not necessarily the best car. Actually, at no point did he have the best car in those 8 wins.
He outpaced Sebastian Vettel when they were both at Red Bull.
Yeah.
Right? And that's Sebastian directly off of his 4-year consecutive run.
I actually, that's the one time I agree with Villeneuve in the sense that I think Sebastian had his mind out of Red Bull at that point. He wasn't the same, because if you look at then his time at Ferrari, he goes to a worse Ferrari and eclipses Daniel in that same time. He had more wins, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but you're right. Head to head,
same hardware. Whether his head was in it or not.
Yeah. It was just to be one more time fair to Vettel. It was technically a different Red Bull than the one he won 4 titles with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but Danny hit the ground running, took his opportunity, and eclipsed him hard. 4 wins to Sebastian's 0 is a big deal.
Danny came out of HRT, one of the worst teams to have ever competed in F1, into a Red Bull and beat the 4-time world champion.
Defending world champion, yeah. It's amazing, yeah. And that doesn't always work. Like, look at George Russell. Went from the worst Williams to a mediocre Mercedes. There wasn't 4 wins. There wasn't eclipsing Lewis Hamilton.
No. At best, it was par with Lewis Hamilton.
Exactly. So for Danny to do what he did was a big jump, a big deal. He has exceptional talent. And that's kind of why I'm salty about this. It's like, let him retire on his terms.
The problem is I don't think he would retire.
If you give him an offer you can't refuse, if you talk to him at Singapore and say, hey, we're not going to resign you. This is your opportunity to have 6 more races and to say you're retiring. Like the alleged agreement with Sergio.
Yeah, the problem is then they lose Lawson.
But you still, if you sign Liam Lawson for 2025, you don't.
That's a fair point.
A lot of people are saying that this is the audition for Liam into Red Bull next year.
Mm-hmm.
These 6 races, that they're so desperate to find a way to get rid of Sergio that they want to make Liam look good to say, okay, Sergio, you got to go. I think the smart idea would have been to say, hey, Sergio, take a fucking break. You can't get past Hulkenberg for the 3rd time this season. And that really pisses me off. You know. But yeah, The third time this season you struggled to get past Hulkenberg for many laps. Austria, this one, and I think there was one more. Take a break. You're still on our contract. You're still on our payroll. We're still going to pay you the next 2 seasons. You're probably going to drive for Red Bull at some point in those next 2 seasons. Take a break. Let Danny jump in. If he has it, he has it. If he doesn't, we can get rid of him and audition Liam. Danny didn't deserve the sacking Sergio did, is what I'm getting at. Or the sidelining. Because you're right, sacking's the wrong word.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I can't argue with your reasoning there. But that's not the way it went down.
Yeah. It's just bad PR. It's a bad way to end the career of one of our legends. Like Sebastian Vettel, I think, saw the writing on the walls that something like that could happen to him, and he retired and had his farewell tour 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You didn't give Danny that option, did you? Because he still wanted to race. I'm just saying, give him the option.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you, but frankly, I would love to see Daniel go off and do something else. Like, I think he would be fantastic in WEC or even Rally.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
Like, with how much he enjoys motocross and shit like that, like, I think it would be great to see him behind the wheel of a proper rally car.
He could even start an Australian rally, which is just Holden versus Ford, like Eric Bana used to talk about. If you ever saw that Top Gear episode with Eric Bana.
Isn't that just supercars?
Yeah, like it's rally courses.
Sure.
But you're right. Yeah, those are 2 good avenues. I'm not saying Danny didn't need to go, because it's pretty clear this season just didn't happen. Even last season.
Mm-hmm.
It was time for him to go. And to be fair to your point that you brought up earlier, yeah, if you and I have been ruthless this season, I need to be consistent with that. It's just odd that you're so desperate to get rid of him that you... And to do it for Lawson, too, pisses me off. Because I just don't see much there either.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It very much seems like a Netflix clickbait type selection. Because every time they've talked about Daniel Ricciardo not doing well this season, they cut to Liam in the garage.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, we get it. He's on the fucking sidelines waiting. This is not a soap opera. This is racing.
And his 5 races were not as good as Colapinto's 3 so far.
Colapinto's, in my opinion, outperformed every rookie we've seen.
Definitely Bierman. Yeah, definitely Antonelli. Yeah, definitely Lawson.
Pietro.
Oh, that doesn't count. That's just...
I'm just saying, like, I'm not talking about just this year. I'm talking about in many years. He's probably one of the better rookies we've seen in a long time.
His expectations were so low that it's making it look better. And I just need to point this out. It's still a 10th that turned into an 8th by Nick's Law. Let's relax. However, if he keeps up this pace, he's going to do more exceptional things, I think, is what you're saying.
Yes. We're so used to Williams being a terrible car and Alex outperforming a terrible car. Colapinto is either an amazing driver in a terrible car, outperforming Albon, or he's an average driver and Albon isn't as good as we think he is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Logan was just that bad.
And Latifi was just that bad. And Nick DeVries was just that bad. Yeah.
Right? So Colapinto now has what it takes to show one way or the other. Either I am a world championship contender in the sense that everybody praises Albon and I've outperformed him in this shitty car, or I deserve to be on the F1 grid because I'm just as good as this mid-range driver in a mid-range car.
Yes. However, I need to see the full body of work before I make my final decision on Colapinto. This hype, this talk that Vowles is like, we're gonna discuss maybe giving him the Sauber seat. Okay, settle the fuck down for a 10th place. The last driver to finish 10th in early on was Zhou Guanyu. How's that working out, everybody? And yet another race half a second slower in qualifying than Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, and also, what leverage does Vowles have at Sauber? When who's making the decision on the next driver?
Yeah, Binotto and I forget the other one.
Binotto.
Yeah, Binotto. Yeah.
So it's Sauber, which is its own team, who will become Audi, who has no allegiance to Mercedes. Why would they? Being run by an Italian who used to run the Ferrari squad. Why does he even need to pick up the phone?
It's the point I'm trying to make, because you're right. Yeah, there's absolutely no avenue for Colapinto to go there. The point I'm trying to make is that the media is trying to voice that in already for a 10th place. And I'm just trying to say, let's cool it on Colapinto just a little bit.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. If he ends up with that Sauber seat, he deserves it.
He shouldn't want it. But yeah, you're right. Yes, if he ends up with it.
I don't necessarily think it's the right choice for Sauber.
For anybody, but yeah. Who do you think is... Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Well, they have their own driver academy.
Bortoleto and Maloney.
Bortoletto's McLaren. It's Maloney. Everybody is saying Bortoleto because McLaren wants to get him in there. So it's the same thing as Colapinto. It's how much is somebody going to pay to shoehorn them into Sauber? Because frankly, if Bortoleto gets the Sauber seat, it's because McLaren is paying to put him there. Same with Colapinto, frankly. The only reason I see him being there is because Vowles says, "Hey, here's a chunk of cash. Take him."
They need all the cash they can get right now. Well, allegedly not. Apparently, Williams is well funded again. But.
They are, and we have Zane Maloney for the Sauber Young Driver Academy, who has just signed with Lola Yamaha to race Formula E. So you've got your Young Driver Academy driver who has just said, I'm top 3, top 4, whatever it is, in F2 at the moment, and he's given up on F1. He's signed with an Formula E team.
Higher than Doohan, higher than Bierman, higher than Antonelli, higher than Colapinto.
Yes. And he's effectively given up on his chances in F1 to sign for Formula E.
If rookies are all the rage again, Sauber, why not give him a chance? Even half a season.
You've already got him paired with Hülkenberg.
He can learn a lot.
Yeah.
How great does my prediction of a turd in the punch bowl of Hülkenberg signing for Sauber so early look now? It looks really good. What I said. It was the stupidest thing for Sauber. It was the stupidest thing for now Hülkenberg to have done. Because remember, the Sauber seat was where he's finally going to get his podium because they're going to be competitive, right? Because he's never had the car, right?
I don't know that anybody said that. That's you putting pieces together that don't exist.
In the media, yes, yeah. And in my beautiful mind. Like John Nash. I forgot the name for a bit. John Nash in A Beautiful Mind. You remember, there's a whole bunch of writing on the blackboard and it all comes together.
So conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hülkenberg was responsible for 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about the level of nonsense that we expect from you.
Thank you. Anyways, we got off on the topic, but do you want to add anything about the Daniel Ricciardo situation, the Liam Lawson situation, Red Bull situation in general?
No, I think we beat it to death. I just hope that Danny takes this opportunity to go and actually do something else. I don't want to see him go the way of Mark Webber in the sense that he just disappears and comes back as a manager for some other Australian.
Yeah.
I think Danny's young enough, and we know from experience that endurance drivers and other series don't care so much about how old a driver is. We saw Gilles de Ferran died behind the wheel of a race car in his 60s, I believe. Mm-hmm. So Danny still has much to do in racing and can potentially do great things with the right teams in other series, whether it's NASCAR or WEC or Le Mans. So I hope he does that. if he does go to one of those, then I will start watching those series more regularly. This definitely isn't the end for him. It just unfortunate that happened.
A bad way to leave F1 when you deserve better. And to your point, 14-year career is long for any time frame, even now.
Yep.
It's a long career.
It is.
Storied career.
It's just a bit of a kick in the pants because of all the fanfare around bringing him back and what we saw in Drive to Survive, which you know our thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So much fanfare to get him here again and welcome him back to the family just to kick him to the curb.
And I had a whole point when I brought up Hulkenberg the first time. I think it was like 30 minutes ago. I always thought it was a big mistake for Danny to come back mid-2023. Because if you look at it these days, like I said 40 minutes ago, perception is more important than the reality of your results.
Mm-hmm.
Hulkenberg was bad in 2023. However, he is now considered the future for every team. Any team would love to have him, allegedly, for their future. If Danny stayed out that whole 2023 and his mystique kept going up, and Red Bull and VCarb or AlphaTauri at the time just kept fucking up with their drivers, they sacked De Vries, they bring in Lawson, and Lawson doesn't look that much better. The mystique of Daniel Ricciardo would have built to a point where he could have, in his original plan, hey, I'm out of McLaren, they don't want me, I'll sit out 2023, I'll come back in 2024. He could have hit the ground running better, well prepared at another team.
Yeah.
That wanted him and wanted to keep him there and talk him up.
Yeah.
Because that's what Hulkenberg did. 3 years out, but comes to Haas, does nothing, but because he qualifies well, we're now stuck with him for another 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been Danny.
Could have been. And sorry, as you were ranting there, I was thinking about potential opportunities. So it's not completely off topic because part of the reason I think he came back is because of the Ford connection. So having listened to a podcast with Farley, the CEO of Ford, he was saying, he was praising Danny and how much of a stand-up guy Danny is, and he's a phenomenal driver, and they had him doing stuff in Ford cars as part of his Red Bull role before coming back to F1. So I'm thinking in the background here, Danny is still Red Bull affiliated, and Ford likes him. Ford is just in 2024 releasing a new series of race cars because Ford does this thing where, similar to other manufacturers, but more frequent it seems, where they go in and out of racing series. They decide they're not going racing, and then a few years later they reverse that and they release a whole set of factory race cars. This year it's the Mustangs. So the S650 Mustangs, they have GT3, GT4, they have one or two other factory versions of it. One of them is, the road version is the GTD, which is a phenomenal piece of machinery. I don't think it's worth $400,000, but that's what they're charging for it.
Oh my God. No Ford is worth $400,000.
Right, but Ford is trying to legitimately contest and be a winner in WEC and Le Mans and IMSA and all this, right? So why not stick Danny in a Nürburgring race? Why not stick Danny in the Le Mans car?
Yeah,
Right?
I like that.
Put him in a Mustang, see what he can do.
He's got the mustache to drive an American car.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, Sean. And while you were ranting, I thought of a theory. What do you think of this? We know there was a battle between Horner and Marco. Do you think Horner sacrificed his friend, Danny, to let Marco win this round because he knew Lawson was going to be a bust?
It's definitely a theory that I've had in mind, in the sense that it's a good way to justify getting rid of both of them.
Oh, okay. I was going to say one to get rid of the other, but yeah, you think Red Bull will come down and be like, okay, you're both out of here.
By both, I mean Marco and Lawson,
Oh, okay.
right? Like, if he comes in for the next 6 races and he gets a couple of points and they put him in the car for next year, but then next year he doesn't do any better than Perez did, I think then Horner goes back to Red Bull's owners and says, listen, guys, I've been dealing with this shit for 2 seasons now. Marco needs to go and Lawson needs to go. Bye. No more contracts. We're done. Right? And I think he has the ear of those people to the point where he's just looking for the reason to do it, or looking for the evidence to support his theories.
So we both kind of see it that way, and that's good. That Horner's building his case.
Yes.
But it's kind of ruthless that you sacrifice Danny in the meantime. After saying to him, saying publicly in front of Sergio, the goal is always to get Daniel back in this Red Bull. Which you allegedly have all this faith in Sergio. Publicly, you're saying something in the vowels sense. I say that because, vowels, we're supporting Logan, but I would love to sign Carlos Sainz.
Yep.
It's kind of similar to what Horner did. You're doing all this, but in the background, you're building this case just to get rid of Marco.
Yeah. Potentially.
It's fucking ruthless.
I mean, there's nothing saying that Danny won't come back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Because he's 35? So it takes a year out, 36, 37. He's still younger than Alonso.
Younger than when Hulkenberg came back.
He's younger than Raikkonen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And how many times did Raikkonen go in and out of...
That's a different, because that was him retiring a million times over.
Sure. But because he didn't want to deal with the nonsense that Ferrari had him dealing with.
And then Lotus, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he almost bankrupted Lotus. Because of their own contract stupidity.
What a great story. He's probably not going to score that many points. Yeah, he'll just finish 3rd in the standings. Yeah.
You know, apparently Renault Lotus still owes Raikkonen money.
What, 12 years later?
Yeah. Well, Lotus went bankrupt, right? So it never got paid.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about, or should we just call it a night? Holy shit. It's a late night for us.
Yeah. I think that's the natural end of this for tonight.
We end on Kimi Räikkönen being owed money. Let's do that more often. F1_philosophy at Instagram, like producer Gatsby so eloquently said. F1 Philosophy at YouTube. Keep liking our shorts. Keep liking and subscribing. And F1 Philosophy Pod at gmail.com to join the fantasy league you're crushing. Sean, I give it up. Anyways, we'll be back for some more content. We got a whole another autumn break on us, but we got some other things lined up, and we'll be back shortly to discuss some more. This time we won't do some top 10 movies or albums. We'll actually talk Formula One this break.
Yes.
And on that note, good night, everybody.
Good night.